Hi, okay, chapter 11 here, mixed methods designs. And this one will be a shorter video. I just want to touch on a few key points here. So mixed methods means we're combining the qualitative and quantitative in a single study as we're looking at the data. And some of the strengths, of course, there's things that qualitative can do very well. It can get into the probe the whys and the hows, whereas quantitative gives you a very accurate representation of what the situation is or what the relationships between variables are. So if you have both of those combined, you can just imagine that it's much better in some ways. So it's better, but it can also be much more difficult. So it doesn't limit the data to a specific paradigm, I guess you could say, but it's open to any type of question we need to ask. Hey, we can use this method to do it. I was going to compare it to a marriage, whereas singlehood is kind of like just quantitative or just qualitative. A lot of advantages. It can be easier in some senses. Marriage can be much harder, but there's many benefits to marriage. I'm not sure how far that analogy would carry out, though, so let's forget about that. So triangulation is nice because if we're finding the same results or supporting the same results from both directions, that strengthens the fact that, yeah, probably these results do hold some credibility. Main disadvantage is that this is difficult. It's time consuming, energy consuming. You have to have someone who is comfortable with both fields, qualitative and quantitative. You would really not want to use this for a thesis or a dissertation, just because it can be so challenging to conduct. It can be very valuable, but it's so challenging that it would be much better to focus any study that you need to do on some specific narrow topic that you can actually get done, even competing with all your other responsibilities. And save the mixed methods for something that can stretch out over years if you needed to at your own pace, because it is very demanding in mentally, physically, financially. Now, what will often happen is you will have kind of a mixed methods in the big picture. So if we are investigating school bullying, for example, we might start off with, and let me go ahead and click in the next sequential explanatory mixed methods. So we would start off with some kind of survey to find out, oh, okay, well, 50% of the elementary students have felt bullying at some point. Get kind of a picture. Maybe we find out that 70% of males have felt bullied, 30% of females. Maybe different percentage of different races have felt bullied. And once we kind of get a layout of the land in terms of elementary school bullying, then maybe we want to interview, again with purposeful sampling here, because we want to talk to some people who have been bullied. And maybe we talk to some negative case analysis. We talk to some people who haven't been bullied, so we can contrast the school experience of a group of students who have been bullied versus a group that haven't. And then maybe that qualitative leads us to some more quantitative questions. Like maybe we find some themes, like bullying is often connected with parental education, for example. And so then our parental beliefs. Then we do some kind of quantitative survey and look for correlations between those two variables. And then maybe we interview parents. So you can see how it goes back and forth there. So sequential explanatory starts with quantitative, goes qualitative. Sequential exploratory is the opposite. You start off by diving in deep to figure out some theory, and then you try to test it with a quantitative generalizable method. Concurrent, you're doing both at the same time. This can get really, really messy. So things you want to look for, how much are you going to basically just do a quantitative survey, for example, but then maybe you have one question at the end that says, explain any of your answers, or you have an open-ended survey item at the bottom? Or are they going to be pretty equal? Or is the qualitative going to dominate and you'll just do a little quantitative? So you may do a lot of interviews, but at the end you might do some correlations. 30% of the interviewees who responded favorably to the project also were struggling financially. You may do some little, or maybe in terms of quotes, because you're going to have a lot of quotes. So you may say 70% of the quotes related to money also were given by interviewees who were from a high socioeconomic status position. And finally, when you're reading mixed methods research, you'll want to make sure that there's specific things that you want to do in quantitative and specific things you want to do in qualitative for good practice. Now, there is some overlap, but there's also some specific to each field. So you would want to see that, okay, while they were doing the quantitative, they made sure to factor out their researcher bias, versus while they were doing the qualitative, they made sure to give very thick, rich descriptions of what was going on. So they're going to want to meet the criteria for both fields, which is one of the reasons why it's harder on the researcher. And limitations, sometimes mixed methods research approach might make you feel like you're Superman, you can do it all. Was the researcher honest at the end of their report about what can and cannot be said from the research? Okay, and that's really all that I wanted to talk about on these mixed methods designs. So, main point I want you to take away, do not do this on any study that you absolutely have to finish for some reason. This is a great approach when you have time to spread out and kind of go into the data, qualitative, then quantitative at your own pace. And often, even when you're doing that, you can separate those into individual studies and approach them one at a time. So it's rare that you would want to do mixed methods, but it is becoming more popular.